Game of Thrones, 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 remix, game. Watch the map, watch the map, watch the map, watch the map. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Jason Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson. Jason, that was a really good mixed belt.
I'm a good singer, Ashley. I used to be a musical. I've been in a couple musicals. I can sing, baby. If you know anything about this podcast at this point, you should know that I sing.
Also, just to plug the Patreon really early, we have a Patreon episode where we actually talked about the plays that we've both been in. So.
Oh, did we? Okay. We should do an all musical episode on the Patreon. But this episode is not about the Patreon. This episode is, we're doing a little bit something different. Now, you might be listening here. Generally, Ashley, we're the podcast that does what? What do we do?
We teach you everything you need to know about a character in about an hour, but not today. No,
not today. Today's a little bit different. Today, we thought... It's summer. Spring has come, winter has left, and you might notice that it sounds a little bit different. That's because we are recording as we're driving.
Not for the first time.
Not for the first time, yes. As we, again, try not to make this about a podcast where we talk about our Patreon the entire time, but we've done this on the Patreon several times. The Patreon lovers love it. And now the regular listeners get to love it as well.
Yes.
We're doing some road trips this summer. And we decided, hey, let's just podcast. Let's just podcast while we're driving.
So this is our summer road trip series.
Yeah.
And we hope that we'll actually be in the ear holes of some people on actual road trips.
Yeah, you guys going on your road trips. You have some really cool nerd conversations with your friends. Mm-hmm. Bring us along.
And if you do listen to this on a road trip, please tell us.
Even you, Todd, you can join the conversation.
Todd.
Yeah, Todd.
I don't know, Todd.
He's the person, they didn't want to bring on the trip, but, he's just...
Why you gotta shame Todd like that?
No, I'm saying he's just as valuable. He should be on the trip, but nobody wants him there.
I bet Todd's the guy who can change a tire, though.
Oh, really? There's only one guy that can change a tire?
Yeah, only one.
Learn some skills, kids.
I know one man in my entire life who can change a tire.
Okay, so today, we're going to talk a little bit about... This discussion series is about, starting off with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Now... Game of Thrones is over. It's ended. We might get a couple prequel series. We don't know. But the main series called Game of Thrones is over. Final episode is aired on HBO. And we thought we would talk about the series as a whole. Talk about characters that we thought were successful, plot lines we thought were successful, and at the very end, I think we will get into the nitty-gritty about whether we think the finale was a successful ending to a series. And this is an interesting discussion because, as we're going to talk about the series completely, we'd love to take this discussion to other television shows.
Yes.
Now, television shows that have been completed, because I think TV shows, just like books, are kind of hard to judge without their ending. Don't you agree, Ashley?
I definitely agree. For example, the BBC series Sherlock, in the first 2 seasons, I would have contended was the best show on television, and boy, did they tank that real fast.
All right. Yeah. So, since Game of Thrones is over, we can talk about this, and guys, we are going to go into full spoiler territory. So if you have not seen Game of Thrones, if you have not seen the finale of Game of Thrones, then you're going to want to come back later to this episode, because there's no point about talking about this entire series unless we can spoil stuff. This is just ridiculous here. So, Ashley, where do we want to start off on this?
Where do we want to start?
Yeah, we're sitting here in the car as some road trip. We're some road tripping with the Mine University students. Talking about Game of Thrones, the whole show. How do we do you just want to go take this season by season? Do we want to do a little prelude here? Just like the show. The show did a little prelude. We started out in the forest. Little guy got killed by White Walkers. What's our prelude?
I suppose what we do on every Game of Thrones episode and tell the same story about how we came to Game of Thrones.
Okay. We're going to do a meet cute for Game of Thrones?
I don't know. We've
All right.
done 6 or 7 meet cutes for Game of Thrones by this point.
All right, let's do a quick meet cute for Game of Thrones. Ashley, what's the meet cute?
My meet cute for Game of Thrones is...
No, actually, what is the meet cute, just in case anybody's not listening?
Oh. We're in the car. I don't know what's happening. Meet Cute is the first part of the podcast. Actually, the second part of the podcast where we tell you the first time we met something and how cute it was.
Yes, we're not going to do the 10-cent origin because we don't know it. Okay.
It's a fantasy novel series by George R. R. Martin.
We're talking about the TV show, not a novel.
Fantasy HBO series by D.B. Weiss and David Benioff.
I'm not talking about your fancy books. Even though I read this series before you did.
That's true.
Okay, my meet cute is when I watched the pilot. There we go. All right, cool. Meet cute over.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about Game of Thrones. Ashley, how do we start this thing?
I guess we can start with season 1.
We did our prelude. Okay, let's talk about season 1 of Game of Thrones. Now, of course, we dropped into the first episode. We're right in the middle of Winterfell. Long procession. We see Robert Baratheon. From season 1 of Game of Thrones, what stands out to you? Like, what characters stand out to you? Even from the pilot, I would like to hear, like, from the pilot, what stands out to you?
So I rewatched the pilot fairly recently, leading up to the 8th season of Game of Thrones at the time of this recording. So luckily for me, it is very much in hand. It's actually the second pilot that they made of Game of Thrones, with a couple different casting choices. The first one can be found on corners of the internet and was apparently very bad.
It was too much like a documentary is what I've heard. I've never watched it, though.
Yeah, different Daenerys, different Catelyn, different...
Sean Bean's still there.
Well, Sean Bean is just a goddamn treat. Sean Bean, of course...
Winter is coming.
Stands out to me because he was the whole reason I was interested in the show, because I was like, well, he looks like Boromir, and that was good, so this will be good,
I mean,
right?
he is honestly the reason I watched the show. I saw a giant billboard with him sitting on the Iron Throne, and I was like, oh, I'm into that.
Which, interestingly enough, Ned never does. So.
Nope.
There you go.
No, actually, I think he does when he's Hand of the King. He sort of like sits on there and talks to a couple peasants.
Oh, yes, he does, because Robert makes him, take the audiences. You're
correct. He plants his bottom on that Iron Throne, so he gets to enjoy it a little bit.
He does, and Littlefinger sits over his shoulder and whispers sweet nothings in his stepbrother-in-law's ears.
Yes.
What stands out for me about the pilot, Arya always stood out to me. I always loved her. The intro of her being able to make the bow and arrow shot that Bran can't make is, I think, really wonderful. She's the type of character that I really like. She is, in Shakespearean terms, she's a pants character. And she's a character who, for me, I've enjoyed all the way through, and I actually think has one of the most complete journeys of all the characters that we have seen. Yes. Also, what stands out about the pilot for me was Richard Madden's performance as Robb, because I had read the first book before I watched the first season. And my hot take that I think is pretty much universally accepted is that Richard Madden is a far superior actor to Kit Harington.
I think that is... judges? Yes, we will accept that.
And I was a little bit baffled that just because he didn't have black hair, he wasn't playing Jon Snow. Because even in the books, and even in the pilot, it's immediately evident that Jon is a more important character than Robb.
Yes.
And just from that first pilot, I was like, but that guy should be Jon. He's so much better.
Well, let's just say this right now. I think it's interesting because I think most of the kids in the pilot aren't that great. They really aren't. I would even put Robb into that category. They're not really that great in the pilot.
Robb, Theon, and Jon have very little to do in the pilot after the direwolves, but as a Theon Greyjoy stan, there are some really nice moments of Theon's relationship to Robb and Jon and the Starks in general in the pilot that I think upon first watching you really gloss over, and then when you sort of know where the characters go and what journey he goes on, for me feel very poignant.
The thing that's very interesting, actually, is that I think they cast the kids so well that I actually believe them as brothers and sisters.
Yes, yeah, they did a good job.
And it's weird because when we're told that Jon Snow is a bastard, he looks so much like Robb that I'm kind of like, I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, Jon's bastard status, I think, was always suspect for all of us, whether or not you were immediately on the R plus L equals J train or not. For me, the other main thing that stands out is the scene in the Godswood between Ned and Catelyn, just because it's so beautiful. And because we know very little in the context of the television show about the Godswood and about what that means, and the fact that that location is a point of deference for Ned, but also distance in their personal relationship.
Yes. Hello, listeners. Dr. Strange here, transmitting from the dark dimension to interrupt your podcast to let you know that there's soon a threat. Yes, a threat from Dormammu. He is slowly encroaching into your dimension, and the only way that you can stop him is by building a website. I know this sounds strange, but I have considered the runes, and I have looked at the signs, and I have figured out that the only way to defeat Dormammu and his dark magic is to build your own website using Wix. Now, the good thing about this is I have looked with the Time Stone and have discovered that over 140 million people use Wix already. So if you join those 140 million people, you start and publish your free website with hundreds of design features and apps to grow your brand online, including menus and forms and lists and social bars. Ooh, I love a good... Dr. Strange, actually, fun fact, one time on a trip, I loved going to a social bar. But this is probably not the same social bar. But if you build your website with Wix.com, you can join your magic with me, consult the runestones, and together we can defeat Dormammu in his dark magic! You have to go right now to Wix.com. That's Wix.com/podcast, and you will get 10% off. That is Wix.com/podcast. Use this easy to use website builder, this drag and drop builder, and help Doctor Strange defeat Dormammu and his dark magic! Now back to the show. All right, well, let's talk about season 1 as a whole. We're spending a lot of time on this pilot.
It's a good pilot.
And the Stark kids.
It's a good
here.
pilot.
It's gonna be this. I can already tell we're gonna rush through this just like the creators rush through plot lines. I think that's gonna happen.
I mean, only after like season 6.
Yes, that's true. For me, I really think season 1 is Ned's season.
It's the Stark season.
It is the Stark season. Well, a lot of these seasons are the Stark season. I mean, is there any doubt that the Stark family are the main characters of the show?
No.
I mean, they're always at the forefront, and they're always the characters that we like.
I think perhaps I bring that up because the Lannisters are featured pretty prominently in season 1 and throughout the show.
That's true, as opposites to the Starks.
Yeah, but they're sort of, even though they are physically lighter featured, they are very much set up as just basic broad strokes bad guys in season 1. And Cersei actually gets some of her most dynamic scenes in season 1. She has a beautiful scene with Robert where she asks Robert, like, was there ever a chance for us?
By the way, that scene, not in the books.
No, that's an invention of the show.
And again, we're in this period post the Game of Thrones finale where fans want to throw the writers of the series and be like, the books are so much better. I argue that scene, one of the best scenes of the entire series.
I mean, I definitely come down in the camp that the books are always better, but that's a difference of the medium. You can put more information in a book.
Especially for a fantasy book.
Absolutely.
For a fantasy, like you family trees and all kinds of things like that. But I think season 1 is so Ned's season, and I agree with you. Cersei has a lot of great moments in season 1, especially her scene with Ned where she coins the phrase, the Game of Thrones.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think is such a great scene.
Littlefinger also says it to Varys a couple times, and he has his little speech about the ladder and climbing the ladder.
No, he does.
What that takes, yeah. They're the two characters, Littlefinger and Cersei, who are kind of throwing that around. I just brought up Cersei in particular because Cersei is perhaps most dynamic in the first season.
Yes.
And then descends slowly into madness, whereas Jaime is the villain of the first season.
Yeah, he's a prick in season 1. He really is.
And Nikolai Coster-Waldau does a fabulous job playing him. Like, he is making such good choices and such complicated choices, even when the character's in its broadest strokes. But then where you see where the character ends up, like, Jaime has a true hero's journey, a true redemption arc. And Tyrion is Tyrion definitely matures, but he's sort of the only Lannister that you like for the whole first season.
Yes. Let's talk about that. That's a good point. Based on what we see in season 1, and what we know of the finale, what are some things that track through the series? Because I think
every single character.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that it's interesting because I think Tyrion, yes, we meet him. He's this boozer of he's around whoring. He's going to all the whorehouses.
We meet him in the brothel.
They weirdly dye his hair in season 1.
They put a bad wig on poor Peter Dinklage.
And they make his hair blonde, but he quickly becomes one of our favorite characters.
Well, he slaps Joff in episode 2 and has the wonderful speech to Jon about dwarves, bastards, and broken things.
Yes, which I think is definitely a sign to the finale. But also the idea that, we get these little touches where Jon Snow and Tyrion connect in episode 2.
Yep.
And that connection will go all the way to the final episode of the series.
Absolutely. All of the Stark children are the easiest examples because they're the most fleshed out at this point. So this is going to be full spoilers for the finale.
We already said the spoiler thing.
I know, but just in case anyone's been...
Jon Snow murders Daenerys. There we go. The ultimate spoiler is out there. And then Arya's ship lands at New York City, and she meets Caprica 6, and all along the Watchtower plays. We know that's the finale.
Tweet.
I know. I'm very proud of that tweet.
But Sansa is a little girl who wants to grow up to be queen. Sansa is queen in the finale. Arya is a little girl who wants to make her own way in the world. Arya literally leaves to find the new world. Bran is a little boy who wants to become a knight of the Kingsguard. Bran becomes the literal king. Jon is a bastard who finds his home by going north. Jon loses all titles and all holdings and goes north. Everything you know about these characters is established in the pilot or in the second episode and then is mirrored in the finale.
It's fulfilled.
And also, for anyone who might be listening who's still mad about Bran being king, in the books, the first POV main character chapter is Bran's chapter.
Are we hopping right to the finale discussion? Is that what we're doing?
Well, I'm just saying, so if you didn't think that had been planted and if you thought that was something that was rushed to, it's definitely something that I think has been in the works for a long time.
Yes. Okay, so let's move on. First off, we got to talk about Ned getting his head cut off.
Someone spoiled that for me when I was reading the book.
It wasn't me, was it?
No,
I didn't think it was.
We had not met.
Oh, okay.
It was another gentleman.
I didn't think it was me.
Who I was seeing at the time, and I was reading the book, and he's like, yeah, but Ned dies in the end. And I was like, what the actual?
Hey, guy.
Don't spoil stuff.
I bet your name is Todd. What the F? Okay.
Yeah, man.
I think right here and now, I think that moment is easily one of the greatest moments of television of all time.
That moment is the reason why anyone watches the show and why anyone cares, because the first season got decent ratings.
Not great, though.
But after that, it was season 2 where it became this cultural phenomenon because we were sold, and the book does the exact same thing. You are sold this bill of goods that Eddard Stark is the lead character, that Eddard Stark is the moral compass, that Eddard Stark is a person who should be king but doesn't want it. And then to fully murder him is
brilliant piece of writing,
but also wildly unheard of in that genre of storytelling. Like if this were Lord of the Rings,
it's Frodo. Frodo dies.
Or
Aragorn.
It would never more Aragorn. It would never have happened. Like Aragorn goes on to assume his destiny and become the king of Gondor.
Yes.
And that's something that you can only do 50 years after something like Lord of the Rings.
Okay. So season 2 is really like
Rob's rise, Rob's rebellion.
Yeah, it's kind of Rob Stark demise. Becoming the king of the North. It's Tyrion sort of becoming the hand of the king.
Yeah, Tywin comes back into the picture in season 2.
His dad, although Tywin spends a lot of time away in season 2, he's sort of stuck in that hall that Arya spends a lot of time. Arya spends a lot of time walking in season 2.
Yep.
Sansa's kind of stuck being tortured by Joffrey.
Yeah.
For season 2, and then Jon kind of wanders in the north for a while, then meets a little redheaded girl. Is basically what his season 2 is. So, but season 2 does the interesting thing where they have a crossover with Lost, where we have a smoke baby come in and murder Renly Baratheon.
Oh, well, also, yeah, we get what is called the War of the Five Kings.
Because Stannis Baratheon, Robert's little older brother, shows up.
Yeah, Stannis shows up. Renly and Iron Fist, unfortunately, gets to talk a lot. They show up, and they all start their rebellions as well, sort of coinciding with Robb's rise in the North.
Mm-hmm. And Robb has a lot of successes, which, of course, as the audience, we want that because we're looking at the revenge for Ned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do we want to combine this with season 3 a little bit, or?
Sure. 2 and 3 are very, very heavily tied because 3 is culminated with the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding.
Yes,
which are sort of the end of the Five Kings.
The Purple Wedding actually does not happen until the beginning of season 4.
Oh, well, sorry. There
it's like episode 2 or 3 of season 4.
Wow.
Because season 3, the 9th episode of season 3 is the Red Wedding.
Because Robb meets
the dirty nurse,
John Watson's ex-girlfriend.
The dirty nurse, as I call her.
/ Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter. That's a real fact about that actress.
Is it really Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter?
Yeah.
Oh,
she's either his granddaughter or his great-granddaughter.
Okay.
Her family's all actors, which is...
Where were the pratfalls?
Why she has a great Asian. They inexplicably don't make her Jane Westerling. They make her Talisa fake character. Which I think is annoying. I think Jane Westerling, the character that Robb marries in the books, is much more interesting, but that's just my 2 cents. Being the same Jane. That either way, Robb.
All right, let's not get in the weeds here.
Robb gets married. He's supposed to get married to the Freys. The Freys get mad, and the first Doctor chops off Robb.
Sure. Let's talk about Robb's character arc. So Robb's character arc ends at the end of season 3, and he is, he gets made the King of the North in season 1.
Yeah.
He is the character that we are expecting to redeem Ned Stark's revenge, get the ultimate revenge.
Yeah.
We expect him to John Wick King's Landing for his dad. And it doesn't happen. Robb is brutally murdered in one of the most horrific scenes in the books and the show.
Yep.
Actually, what do we think this show is telling us with this lesson? Is it the idea that Robb did not learn the lessons of his father? What do we feel about Robb Stark's character arc? Who, again, we thought Robb was the hero of the show again, and he's not.
Right. It's very interesting. Robb, I think, in a lot of ways, suffers by being Jon's younger brother, or who we think of as Jon's younger brother, because...
Is Jon older than him? I thought they were the same age.
Jon is about 6 months older than Robb.
Okay, so barely.
Canonically, per the books. I think the actors are either the same age, or pretty close. So yes, because Ned comes home with Jon, and then Catelyn becomes pregnant with Robb. So he's like 6 or 9 months older than Robb, because he's born when Ned's away at war.
Cool. All right.
So anyway, I think it's difficult for me to try and say what they're trying to tell us about Robb. Robb is interesting because of all the children, I think he is the most equal parts Ned and Catelyn. I think he has both of their faults. Catelyn is very charismatic. Catelyn is very good at getting people to follow her. Catelyn is very good at getting people to help her. Robb is also good at that. But Robb cannot quite instill the loyalty that Ned can because of his youth. Like the Karstarks forsake him, which is a pretty big blow. And he loses about half his forces, which is why he has to go to Walder Frey and apologize for not marrying one of his daughters and beg because he needs those bannermen. And something that we know about Ned is Ned wears all of his feelings on his sleeves, and Ned is honest to a fault, and so is Robb. Like, Robb can't lie. So Robb can get people to listen to him, but Robb can't manipulate them in the way that he needs to. And so while he's the best part to both of his parents, he's also the worst part. So that's ultimately his downfall. But I think because Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire is so heavily based on the Tudor dynasty and the War of the Roses, which ended with the creation of the Tudor dynasty and Henry VII naming himself king, the Tudors being a middle-of-the-road house that up-jumped, and Henry II being a second son, there was no way that Ned Stark's first son was ever going to be anything other than a sacrificial lamb. What do you think it says about his character?
I said that I think it's that he just didn't learn his dad's lesson. I think maybe that's the thing I think that's literally what George R. R. Martin is trying to tell us, is that you can't be Ned Stark in Westeros. You cannot act like what Ned Stark in Westeros, because as we will see, even in the finale of Game of Thrones, that's why Jon Snow suffers everything that he suffers. Because I'm going to jump a little bit ahead just for this little piece of Jon Snow. It's the idea that when Jon Snow murders Daenerys, we get the impression that he probably didn't run out there and be like, oh man, she died. He probably ran out there and was like, I killed her.
Yeah.
Like, he probably just flat out admitted it to him. Because also in season 6, we see where Jon could not lie to Cersei, or season 7, excuse me. He could not lie to Cersei about who his loyalties are.
And Ned couldn't in season 1.
Exactly. So I think it's this idea that Jon and Robb were too much like Ned. But I think maybe Robb's downfall is that he maybe got a little cocky with it. Because he was like, oh, I am the king of the north. I am this awesome leader. Whereas Jon is always the guy who's like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Even when they make him king of the north, he's like, I don't want it.
Well, Robb is also a lesson to Jon, because Robb has the legitimacy of being Ned Stark's first son, and he still winds up murdered.
Yes. Yeah, true.
Like, it does not matter that he is the legitimate son, that he was elected king of the north.
Even though
he still goes out brutally.
Even though, as many characters, and I think probably most viewers would say, that Jon Snow is probably the more actual son of Ned Stark.
Jon Snow is the Ned Starkiest Ned Stark, whoever Jon Snow.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Down to the fact where Jon evolves into a real stick in the mud as an adult.
Well, let's talk about Daenerys's arc here.
Do we have to?
Well, okay, let's save Daenerys till the finale, because we're gonna get to her.
Yeah.
And we can talk about her arc all together. Okay, but I think we should talk. We've been talking about all the dudes. We can talk about some of the ladies here. There's so many characters here. Let's talk about Cersei here. Mm-hmm. So Cersei, spends a lot of the first 3 seasons just kind of torturing Sansa, boning Jaime, and kind of just manipulating stuff. She doesn't really have a lot to do in the first 3 seasons, even though she becomes such an important character. Like, she sort of becomes Joffrey's... she becomes the power behind Joffrey.
She's the regent, yeah.
Yes. But there are storylines in that show where Joffrey at several points ignores her.
Yeah.
And it's not until Joffrey dies that she sort of becomes the queen that we will see later in the series. Now, do you think this was them trying to say, oh, watch out, there's a snake in the grass that you can't see, and that she's going to be the real problem down the road? Or, I don't know, what do you think they were trying to say with Cersei? What were they doing with Cersei in the early seasons? What do you think?
I think Cersei is the ultimate... And I think people want to think this is Daenerys, but I don't think that's the case. Cersei is the ultimate woman who suffers for her gender. Cersei is the smartest, most capable, most beautiful Lannister. She's also the firstborn. She was born before Jaime. But because she was born a woman, she's stripped of her power.
She says that several times.
She doesn't get to keep her name. She doesn't get to rule independently. She doesn't get to be in charge of her children. Myrcella gets sent off to Dorne completely from underneath her. And
am I remembering this incorrectly? Isn't there a scene where Tywin even says, like, I wish you'd been born a son?
Yes. Yeah. She's more Tywin than any of the boys.
Yes, 100%.
That's why I think, I hate Cersei, but I'm
supposed to hate her, though.
No, exactly, but I think she's an interesting, dynamic, wonderful, complicated character. Because there's a lot of characters in Game of Thrones that are mothers and that are driven by their identity as a mother. Mm-hmm. And it makes them both wonderful and despicable. Catelyn Stark is an example of that.
Catelyn Stark goes crazy.
Catelyn is a character that I really waffle on and I've really enjoyed experiencing, because she will truly do anything for her children, but she's so despicable to Jon because of what she thinks Jon represents. And Jon was just an innocent baby who needed to be taken care of. Like when Bran is there and Jon comes to say goodbye, she screams at him to get out of the room.
Well, and then also the idea when in season 2, when she lets Jaime go.
Yes, for her girls, which she thinks Robb would not have done.
Robb would not have done that at all. I don't think so. And I think there's several scenes like for the rest of the season where everybody's like, what were you thinking? What were you doing? And again, strategically, that was such a boneheaded move. And you would think that Catelyn, as the High Lady of Winterfell, who has been in plenty of battles herself, at the side of Ned, again, was blinded by her motherhood in that moment.
And Cersei is the same way. And Tyrion even says it in the final season, all of the most horrible things Cersei did, she did for love of her children.
Yes.
In the show, in the first season, she has a little speech to Catelyn where she says that she was pregnant with Robert's baby and it was miscarried. In the book, they imply that she aborted that baby because she only wanted Jaime's children.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think is interesting food for thought about Cersei as a mother. But I did want to bring that up because I think that is the point of Cersei. And then ultimately, sort of in the narrative structure, to set her up to be the big bad. Well, to fake us out that she's the big bad in the final season, right? Because, of course, it winds up being Dany.
All right, so we're going to go to season 4, talking about Purple Wedding Time.
Heck yeah.
Joffrey, the little bitch, goes down, poisoned by
Olenna Tyrell, Queen of Thorns.
Can I remember?
The true goddess.
Okay, so Joffrey is set up as this little bastard,
literally.
Yeah, honestly, yes. But this kid who has his hand in every jar in the candy shop, and he's still not happy.
Well, he's straight up evil. There's a scene in season, it's either 2 or 3, where for his name day, Tyrion sends him some sex workers, and Joffrey has them beat each other and break each other's bones. Joffrey is a bad dude to his core.
Yes, he is so spoiled, which again, I think is the line why Tyrion says in the finale, says that, the childs of kings are terrible or
can't be monsters
or whatever.
That,
anyways, I almost think that killing Joffrey is almost a little bit of a fan servicey moment. Even in the books, I think it's you hate that character so much that you want him to die.
Sure, but it's also in service of something that the show forgets later on, and the books have the luxury of being able to deal with. It's in service of the prophecy about Cersei that her children she will see her children die. That will be buried in gold cloaks.
Yes.
So you got to start with Joff, and it's the most satisfying to watch him die.
Now, we also got to talk about, at this point, with Jon Snow, he's up north. He's pretending to be a wildling.
Yep.
He's talking to old Mance Rayder. And he's experienced the touch of a woman, Ygritte.
He's given her the Lord's kiss.
The lovely Ygritte.
Yep, and Kit Harington got so into that role that he married
her in real life, and then he divorced her and married Tormund in real life, and they're such a lovely couple.
Top 10 favorite memes of all time, for sure, is that wedding photo.
So let's talk about Jon Snow up here. So Jon Snow literally goes wild. He gives himself...
He goes native,
He goes native, yes, 100%. He goes native. He turns 100%.
But it's because the wildlings are a meritocracy, which is what the show pretends Westeros becomes at the end, but it's not. It's an oligarchy. It's an elected monarchy. The wildlings,
they're very progressive.
You gain rank based on your capabilities and what you can do. It doesn't matter if you're bastard born, doesn't matter if you're a lady, doesn't matter if you got one eye. And they, even though they don't trust Jon because he's a crow, they respect Jon.
Yes.
Which is something he's never experienced before.
Well, yeah, just because of the cloak he wears, they're a little bit afraid of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really good. But what do you think? Do you think that giving Jon a romance, good call, bad call? Because Jon gets 2 romances in this show.
Yeah, tough to say because neither of them are going to work out from the beginning.
Yeah, and he kills Ygritte, right? I forget.
He doesn't kill her. That little boy kills her.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Ollie. And then
Jon kills Ollie.
And then Ollie dies. Yeah. But Ygritte is part of the wildling attack on Castle Black.
Yes.
Before Jon creates the peace. In the book, Jon is firing arrows, and Ygritte is struck with an arrow, and Jon doesn't know if it's her or not. In the show, it's the little boy Ollie.
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
But I don't know how I feel about it, really, because I guess it's showing us that Jon Snow must suffer, not unlike Conan O'Brien, Miles O'Brien,
like the late night show host Conan O'Brien.
He's lived such a hard life. But like nothing goes Jon's way. I do think it is interesting that he falls in love with a redheaded woman, not unlike Ned and Catelyn.
Interesting.
I think that's an interesting, perhaps unintentional piece of learned behavior. But also because we know he's a Targaryen. The wildlings call redheads kissed by fire.
Oh, interesting.
So perhaps that's a meta-narrative choice made by Martin.
Well, let's talk about Arya. Miss Arya. At this point...
Bravos.
At this point in season 4, she's in Bravos. She's training. She's being a faceless man. She's made Jawiin Hokapaga, whatever his name is.
Jawiin Hagar.
There you go. And they have their weird Mission Impossible face mapping technology that's never quite clear how it works. Because
one has to assume it's magic.
Well, yes, because I don't care how good you skin a person's face. It's not going to fit perfectly on your face, and you're not going to have their voice. It has to be magic. Let's talk about this. So Arya goes there. She gets trained. She sort of follows the rules, but she doesn't follow the rules. Then she has a fight with the other girl who works for Jawiin. She gets blinded. She has to sell some fish for a while. Then she has a fight. Then she runs away. Well, what really... Now, I'm going to bring this point up because there have been some flack recently over the finale about why Bran getting to become the king at the very end is a little ridiculous because we didn't have a season. We had a whole season without Bran.
For the whole
season 5, we had no Bran. I'm going to make the argument that I think we should have had a whole season 4 with no Arya because I honestly think that the whole storyline of Arya being a blind fish lady literally serves nothing to the story besides the fact that by the time she comes back to Westeros, she's a badass lady. I think you could have skipped ahead and just showed us that she was a badass lady.
That was never going to happen because Arya is the single most universally beloved character on the show. Like, she's the only one that nobody doesn't like Arya. Even if you don't like stories that Arya is a part of. It makes complete sense that she goes to Bravos, not only because she meets Jawiin Hagar in the
season 2.
In season 2, when she's heading north to
in Harrenhal, I believe is where she meets him.
No, when they're leaving King's Landing, there's 3 men, a raper, someone else, and Jawiin Hagar who are inside a cell.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And then Arya frees them when they're attacked, and he promises her 3 deaths. But when Arya was living in King's Landing with her sister and her father, Ned gets her a tutor, Syrio Farrell, who's a water dancer from Bravos, who is one of the only people who's been kind to Arya and not made fun of her. So for me, it makes sense that she goes to Bravos. I like the House of Black and White story.
Oh, really? Okay, so sell me on it, please.
I do agree that, look, seasons 4 and 5 and 6 could have used heavy rewrites and edits.
I think season 3, 4, and 5. I think season 6 is good.
I think you could have compressed that storyline a lot. I also think you could have dealt more with the mythology of it. And the books go a lot into Arya's involvement working with corpses and the god of death and what that means and how that changes Arya's worldview. And that's like heady stuff that's difficult to transfer into a television show. So I understand why they reduce it to her just being a badass fighter. And having her fight the waif is an interesting choice, right? Because it's her fighting another female, which is not something we get a lot of on the show. But ultimately, the storyline only exists so that she can kill the Night King. You know?
Well, yeah, but
then Walder Frey a little bit later.
Sure, but I'm saying, like, overall, those storylines, just seeing that episode, I agree with you, it should have been just way compressed.
Yeah.
Like, we probably could have done the entire Arya and Bravos in maybe 3 to 4 episodes.
I agree with that.
Instead, they spent 10 episodes. And it's something that, okay, so we're talking about the show here. This is where Game of Thrones starts stumbling.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, a lot of people think that Game of Thrones doesn't stumble until season 7 and 8. I disagree.
I think that's an insane thing to say because season 4 and 5 are truly so bad.
Yeah.
There are highlights.
Yes. Now, season 4 and 5, and again, we're going to get into a little bit of the production here. So season 4 and 5, there are several episodes in those seasons where we see certain characters only for a scene,
particularly
a singular scene.
Sansa or Theon / Ramsay.
Yeah, a lot of the King's Landing people.
Yeah.
We only see them for a single scene. Now, that makes it seem like absolutely nothing happens for almost 2 seasons. And there's so much out there where you're like, man, you could have compressed this, you could have compressed this, you could have done this.
In fact, Jason and I dropped off and stopped watching live for 2 seasons.
Oh, it was season 5 where we stopped watching that.
Yeah.
And then we caught up and like binged it all together right before season 6. But yeah, like again, I think we might not have rushed at the very end if we had compressed on that stuff. Now, I will say on the point of the showrunners and a point of defense for them, that this was the point where they didn't know whether George was going to finish the books before them.
We kept hearing like, oh, in 6 months the next book is coming because Dance with Dragons, the last one that was published was between season 1 and 2.
Yes.
So we all thought after season 3 we were getting The Winds of Winter.
Or season 4, I think, yeah.
And then it never happened.
Yep.
And then it never happened. And then it never happened, and it still ain't never happened.
And the show finished.
And they kept spinning the wheels on these characters because all their storylines dried up.
Yeah, you could tell.
Which is why Bran goes away for a whole goddamn season.
Yes, you could tell that the showrunners were a little bit afraid of going past the books.
Yeah.
And so they were slowing down the storylines. They were slowing them down to make sure that maybe George could catch them.
And that is why the last 2 seasons feel as compressed as they do. And if they
as rushed.
Yes.
And same thing. Sorry, my bad.
Then what they know now, and this is the benefit of hindsight, they could have paced the show. Game of Thrones could have totally worked in an 8-season structure.
Yes. And I also think you could have...
This is the show that we got.
And I think you could have almost completely combined season 4 and season 5.
God, it would have been...
Maybe even season 3. Like, you might have been able to compress all 3 of those seasons into, like, a season and a half.
Well, the problem we start getting into in season 3 is book 3 is god-awful boring.
Yep.
And then Dorne sucks. And then they cast Jawiin Renoir as Ramsay Snow, cum Ramsay Bolton. And he's a really wonderful actor. And I think they really liked him, so they kept him around because they liked him.
And they kept adding stuff to him, and yes.
But he didn't make good, like, that was when it got really gross and really rapey, and, like, that's why I stopped watching it, because I didn't want to watch torture porn. And that's what, for me, Game of Thrones started to feel like. And it wasn't until around season 6 where they were like, we give up on Martin, that we started getting story beats and character development once again.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere, I believe it's the end of season 5, beginning of 6 is where they pass. It
depends on certain storylines.
Well, because season 5 ends with the death of Jon Snow, which is what the end of Dance with Dragons is.
Yes.
Is the death of Jon Snow. So that's interesting. Okay, so all right, let's get to it. Let's just speed ahead a little bit.
Yeah, let's.
Let's go to the last 2 seasons. Let's talk about 7 and 8. This is the seasons past the books. Mm-hmm. Ashley, any characters out of these? I mean, this is where we start like ratcheting up the Night Army. You know, the Night Kings are coming.
Yeah.
I guess in 6, 7, and 8, Daenerys finally crosses the sea.
God, she stops being an awful white savior and a complete and utter just monster, and comes over to Westeros to be a complete and utter monster.
Well, I gotta say, like, I do think that the end of season 6...
Is that the Misa scene where it's literally all the people of color holding her up like a goddess?
That's way earlier. I don't remember. I do remember being I do remember that being my least favorite final scene of any of the finales.
Yeah.
Is because I was like, that's it? I actually think that's the end of season 3. I think that's the end of season 3 because I remember the Red Wedding being so exciting, and then I remember seeing that and being like, that's where you decided to end the season? I just
remember seeing that and being like, this is troubling on so many levels.
Because I think season 4 is the one where it's just Arya on the ship. Like looking at I don't know, I forget
Dorne
them.
Shows
but
up
there were a couple of them where I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because like Jon Snow's death as the final scene is really strong.
Yeah.
Daenerys finally crossing the ocean as a final scene is really strong.
Yeah.
The Night King resurrecting the dragon is really strong. Game of Thrones generally has really strong final scenes. Like that's why in the first 2 seasons they always ended it with the Night Army like marching.
Yeah.
Like see the end of season 2 is Sam finds the Night Army and they march past him and you're like, oh man, here they come. But yeah, okay, so let's I guess it's hard not to talk about the last 2 seasons without just flat out talking about the finale.
Well,
so,
it's also for us. It's so fresh right now.
Yeah, so I guess let's jump through the finale and let's talk about
Sansa becomes Cersei Lannister.
Let's talk about each of the characters.
Yeah,
and let's track them through the series.
Okay, cool.
And see what we think about where they ended up and pluses and positives and minuses, whatever. And since you mentioned Sansa, let's go right to Sansa. Ashley, I assume you have some saucy Sansa thoughts.
Yeah, I don't like Sansa. First of all,
does anybody like Sansa?
Some people think she's the best character on the show.
That's a little weird. I don't think so.
She's a character that, from like a structural writing perspective, I really appreciate. I think she's had an incredible journey. I never liked her. I will never like her. I like the idea. I really think she becomes Cersei Lannister. And in season 1, particularly when they're together in Maegor's Holdfast, Cersei gives Sansa a lot of advice that she winds up taking later on. Littlefinger gives Sansa a lot of advice that she winds up taking later on. Sansa is Catelyn Stark who knows her power. And I think her winding up as Queen of the North is a really great choice. It's a really
bold choice. And also her carving the North out of the Seven Kingdoms, being like, this is our own kingdom, F you.
I think it was sloppily handled in the episode.
Sure.
It deserved more time and more dialogue than just one single line.
I have a feeling that in the books that
it's going to be a whole chapter.
It's going to be a whole chapter. I have a feeling in the books there's going to be like that scene, and then you're going to see Bran in his chambers, and Sansa goes to him and is like, "Look, I didn't want to say this in front of everybody. This is what we're going to do."
Yeah, but I like it, and I think it's a very powerful statement that Sansa, the little girl who wanted to be a queen, winds up becoming the Queen of the North.
Yeah, 100%. I like it. It is true. Like, she takes the lessons of Cersei, she takes the lessons of Littlefinger, but she's not heartless.
No,
which I think is very interesting.
She loves her family,
and she loves the North. Like, she truly. It's so funny because this is why I like where they end her up in the finale. Is in the pilot, she hates the North.
She can't wait to go.
And she's like, "Oh, King's Landing, so pretty, so pretty." And it's so interesting that King's Landing is a nightmare space for her.
Yeah.
So yeah, who do you want to go next? Pick a character.
Well, let's do Arya next, right?
All right,
because
Arya.
they're sort of complementary sides.
Okay, no, Arya's a little weird to me. All right, so Arya does get a badass ending just with the Night King.
Yeah,
her killing the Night King is, I think, really earned. Kind of comes out of nowhere, but the fact that she takes out the Night King is very interesting.
It's cool.
It's really cool, and it makes sense. And if you go back and actually watch the episode, you can see she actually does sneak through the other scenes. You can see her.
You can see Jon yelling at her as she runs by.
Yeah, Jon sees her and tells her to go in there and whatever. And then it also tracks because Bran's the one that gave her that knife.
Yep.
So it's very interesting in that respect.
Well, and that was the knife that was used in the assassination attempt on Catelyn / Bran, and now it's used to protect Bran.
Yes. Now, the interesting thing is that I think Arya deciding to just get on a ship and be like, I'm going to go explore the final frontier is a little strange to me. Now, I understand it from a metatextual standpoint that she's going to be the girl that's going to do things that girls have never done before.
Well, she's going to go make the world where she belongs.
I get it. But it still rang a little weird to me.
I still kind of wanted her to go to Storm's End and live with Gendry.
Oh, yeah? Had the romantic ending?
I shared this meme. I wouldn't even have cared if they never got married. But in season 1, Robert and Ned are walking through
my son and your daughter.
I have a son, you have a daughter. Let us join our houses. And I kind of wanted it to be Gendry and Arya. I thought that would have been very sweet.
Yes.
I think Arya has one of the most complete and interesting arcs of all of the characters.
I do agree. I think she does have one of the best arcs.
And I think they did a truly phenomenal job casting Maisie Williams because she was quite young when they cast her.
She's great.
And she has a couple points in the pilot where you're like, oh boy, you're pretty green. But she's pretty consistently amazing throughout that show.
And she's also consistently short, even in the final episode.
5 feet tall.
She is
and Sophie Turner is 100 feet tall.
She is so tiny.
Yeah.
She's actually the child that looks the least like the most of them.
It's funny, when they have the final shot of the three of them together in King's Landing, when they send Jon off, Isaac Hampstead White, sitting in his wheelchair, is taller than Maisie Williams, standing on her
up.
2 feet.
Yes. Yes. And he was still paid for a full day's of work. All right, good for him.
God, he was such a cute little boy. He's such a weird looking
Let's talk about Bran. Okay, so Bran basically is the inciting incident.
Bran is a walking, talking Deus Ex Machina.
He's the entire show. Like, he's pushed out that window, and that starts the whole thing.
Best meme I saw today was it was like Jamie Lannister, Kingslaying game is so on point. He tried to kill Bran 8 years ago.
I actually laughed out. I laughed out loud when I saw that. So Bran goes up north, becomes the Three-Eyed Raven, gets these mystical powers where he can see everything at all time, future and past. He can warg into anything he wants. He warged several times during the show. We don't know where he wargs to. They don't ever tell us. And then at the very end, he becomes king. Now, I saw a lot of people come after this ending. A lot of people online say it's silly and it's stupid and it's weird, doesn't make sense. And it's so funny because as soon as that scene happened in episode 2, where Tyrion says to Bran, oh, you know everything, tell me a story.
Yeah.
And then they cut away, and I kind of wish we'd heard a little bit of that, because I was like, oh, this is smart, because Tyrion's a smart dude, and he's going to try to pump Bran for information.
And Tyrion loves to read. Tyrion loves stories.
And Bran's the guy that knows everything. And to Tyrion, that's amazing, because Tyrion can be like, you're a walking Wikipedia. I can ask you about anything in Westeros, and you know it. Now, it is a little weird that Tyrion says that Bran has the best story. That is a little weird. Bran really doesn't have the best story. But it's funny, I do think Bran is the best choice for king. And that's part of the reason why, ever since I saw that scene in episode 2 of season 8, I was like, oh, I think Bran's going to be king.
Well, you presented an interesting idea as well, because people have remarked on Bran warging away to find Drogon and being a rather absentee king. And you had remarked that you thought he only accepted that position so that Tyrion would become the hand, because Tyrion is the person who's actually most capable and qualified to be king, but he needs someone over him to keep him in line and tell him when he's acting out of turn.
He's uncontrollable.
Yeah. So he could be vice president, but he could never be president.
Yes, exactly. And Bran honestly, I think, knows that Tyrion can handle the day-to-day and doesn't need him to handle the day-to-day. And, you know, he just needs Bran to kind of come in and say yes, no a couple of times, then walk away.
Put his seal on stuff.
Exactly. But it's also, like, I've made the point several times where I think Bran being the king is the perfect choice because he's objective. Even though he's a Stark, he's even said, like, oh, I'm not a Stark. But it does, like, from an optics standpoint, I understand why people think it looks like the Starks are eating their cake and having it too. It does. By being the king of the Six Kingdoms and the queen of the North. But I also will say the Starks were always our favorite characters, and the Starks were always the main characters of this. I know, which is so funny to me that everyone is mad about it. I mean, this is the same thing like Harry, Hermione, and Ron getting, like, ace positions after Harry Potter. Yeah. They get that because they're our main characters. There's a reason why Leia becomes the general of the Rebel Alliance and Luke becomes the head of the Jedis, because they're our main characters, everyone, just like the Starks. Yeah. I don't understand why people don't understand that. But I think Bran, again, that's the whole reason why I called it. And I'm expecting my check in the mail from George R. R. Martin very soon. All right, let's, Jon Snow. Ashley, why don't you take this one? Well, this is also something that Jason said, and I dwelt on it right before the episode. I also don't want this podcast to come off as just like me being like, nah, I'm right. No, but I want to give credit where credit is due. I don't, when I watch TV, I unless people are asking me, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about where stuff is going to go, because I do like to experience it the way the creators
want me to, and I try very hard to remain as objective as possible, even if I have an emotional reaction to something. But I think the ending for Jon is a perfect ending.
I agree.
And it's kind of like you're giving Jon everything he wants. He felt most at home among the wildlings. You've stripped him of all his possessions, so it doesn't matter that he's Aemon Targaryen, the sixth of his name. Or Aegon, I'm sorry, don't tweet me. He gets to go north with his dog and his best friend.
His best pal.
And he gets to, I love the shot of them all going into, like, they are the new children of the forest. They are going to remake this wild land.
Well, I think I made the prediction that I thought that they would try to give him the throne and he would say no. And then
go north,
and then just go back north of the wall. Like, I never saw Jon staying in Westeros because, again, he was the only time he's ever been happy has been with the Night's Watch. But we have to back up a little bit here because I do agree with you. I love that end for Jon.
Well, they make such a big deal about him being a Targaryen, but the ending tells you that he's more Stark.
Yes.
He's been a Stark all along.
What do we think about Jon killing Daenerys Targaryen? Does that make sense? Does that feel right? I mean, again, we're going to get to Dany.
I mean, honestly, I don't care because I never liked Dany, so I was happy that she died.
Well, like I said, we're gonna get to Dany's character. I don't want to get into Dany's character right now. We're going to talk through that. I want to talk about more like we kind of, you and I both were like, Dany does not survive. Like, Dany's going to die somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
And we had like lots of different predictions about how she was going to die. Like, there's a lot of theories she was going to die in childbirth.
I definitely believed that Dany was going to have Jon's baby, and that was going to affect her.
I really did too.
Death. I will say, I don't know if that would have been a better ending. That's not for me to say.
But yeah, what do we think about Jon literally stabbing Daenerys?
I loved
in the back.
I loved in the front.
No, in the front.
In the chest. Right. I loved the moment because they were in such a close on the two actors, and they both inhaled, so you didn't know for a split second who done who. And I thought that was very interesting. I guess I like it for Jon because it accomplishes a lot of what we need to set up the end, right?
Yes.
But there was a moment when Drogon took Dany's body away, which honestly was one of the most emotional moments for me. I was like, oh no, it was like a nice bookend to the Mother of Dragons storyline, like he takes her body away. I was like, Jon should just leave. Jon should just walk away and just walk to the wall.
I honestly thought Jon was going to do that. I literally thought...
And no one was going to know what happened.
And no one was going to know where the hell he was.
Yeah. And like, they wouldn't have known whose blood that was or or anything. They would just be like, oh, wow, they're gone.
A faceless man got her.
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
Arya, damn it!
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel? Do you think it was correct that Jon was the one who did in Dany?
Well, I guess when you look at it as a story called A Song of Ice and Fire, that makes sense, that it becomes a intertwined murder, and it makes sense that Jon is the one. You know, perhaps the moment's a little weird, but I will say this, it surprised the crap out of me. I did not see it going down like that. So, you know, for that surprising me, then I'm going to say, yeah, I think it was a good moment. I think it was enjoyable, and I'm going to give it a plus on that. I think it was very interesting. All right. Since we dived into her so much, we got to talk about her, Ashley.
Ugh.
We got to talk about the fire.
Ugh.
Stop ooking. We got to talk about Dany. Daenerys Targaryen, first of her name, drinker of coffee cups from Starbucks.
Actually, fun fact, she is the second of her name. She does say she's the first.
Daenerys Targaryen, second of her name.
There was a Daenerys, but she lived in Old Valyria, so perhaps...
Order of Grandes from Starbucks.
Our Daenerys was unaware of her existence.
So we've been avoiding her this entire time. Let's talk about her arc. This is the arc that...
What arc?
Many fans... Oh, no, she has an arc. She does. It's just the fact of the matter is that many fans do not like her arc. Okay, so here it is. Okay, so Dany is a little girl that is sold as a piece of property by her brother to sort of gain what he thinks is going to give him an army. Now, of course, he sells his little sister as a piece of property to Conan the Barbarian, who screws him over, which everybody in the universe could have told you was going to happen.
Also proceeds to rape his sister, by the way, several times.
Yes. She realizes that she's in a shitty situation, and she's like, well, screw it, I'm gonna be just like my brother. I'm gonna make the best that I can out of this shitty situation. I'm gonna eat a horse heart. I'm gonna make sweet love to Conan the Barbarian so much that his army is my army. Then I'm gonna take his army, and we're gonna go to a couple different places, and we're gonna invade a couple other cities, and I'm gonna tell these cities that have slaves that I'm gonna free the slaves, but I'm actually only freeing the slaves so that I can get them as an army. And then when that doesn't work out for me, I'm going to go buy the most dangerous and baddest mofo army in all the entire world, the Unsullied, these people that are trained. And not only does she not buy them, she steals them.
Well, there
she
are also
the most evil army in the world.
Several points where Dany cannot feed these people that she has
freed,
so-called freed, where they just drop off. Like, Dany is not good at anything.
And then she goes,
and every man falls in love with her because she's got white hair.
Exactly. And then she goes back to this other city. She crucifies them. She crosses the ocean.
Oh, Karth.
She crosses the ocean, and the people of Westeros are like, "Who are you?" And she's upset that they don't know
that they don't love her.
That they don't love a Targaryen. And then she proceeds to, she burns a train very easily, which is one of the greatest action sequences in the entire show. She kills Sam's father and brother.
His hot brother.
Burns them alive instead of giving them a choice. And then she gets to King's Landing, and Tyrion is like, hey, I'm pretty certain I can get the city to surrender. If you hear the bells, that means they surrender. So she gets there. She burns some of the city, easily burns them all. She's lost her other dragon. She's lost Melisandre. But she does do the one good thing, the one noble thing that she does. And I think the only reason why she does this is because she loves Jon Snow. Is she actually does fight the army of the dead. That is the one selfless thing that she does in her entire arc. And I think she does it for love. Now, goes back to King's Landing. And she basically, the entirety of her entire journey flips on her. And it's funny when she's sitting on the top of King's Landing and she's looking at the Red Keep. Yeah. I always hear the theme from Kill Bill, that when the bride goes crazy when she sees one of her murders, brr, 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 brr. Like, I think they should have played that. I would love to see the fan cut of that, actually. And she goes crazy and she murders the entire thing, basically ensuring and showing us that as much as she fooled herself, she is just as bad as her dad and just as bad as her brother. Well, and that's what this entire show's been telling us.
This, and then Jon's fall from grace after his reveal as a Targaryen, ultimately shows us that the Targaryen should not sit on the throne. Targaryens is bad news. They're not good. You know, Dany does everything that we didn't like about Viserys, everything that people didn't like about Aerys. Like, Dany in every way lives up to her namesake.
I think Dany...
And the reason I joked earlier where I was like, what character arc, is because Dany goes from being a girl who's like, I deserve to be queen, to being a queen who's like, I'll murder you because I deserve this position.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is, again, like
she doesn't learn anything in a traditional character arc. Character arc is supposed to be about growth and development. Hers is more of a descent into madness.
Well, hers is about, she keeps saying this thing that, I'm going to break the wheel, I'm going to break the wheel. But she's the wheel, and she doesn't even realize it. And I think the problem that everybody is having is that there are all these people out there that thought that she should sit on the Iron Throne.
Well,
that they
is not book readers, because Dany's been evil from the beginning.
Well, and that's the thing is that even not reading the book, the book doesn't matter. The show tells us she's a crazy lady from season 1. She's a crazy lady.
Well, look at her.
She eats a horse heart.
Forget about that. Look at her complete unemotional response to the murder of her brother, who she purports to love, even though he treats her poorly.
Yes, and then she burns the Dothraki leaders. Yeah, she burns Meereen.
She burns the witch, who she told to save Drogo and keep him alive, even though it wasn't going to work.
There's an alternate take of Game of Thrones where Khal Drogo doesn't die, and he's actually the very benevolent and peaceful leader, I think.
I don't agree with that.
More so than Dany.
He would have killed less people than Dany. I'll give him that.
But I will say, like, there's this shot in the finale where she's standing above them all, and they do the excellent shot with the cinematography of the dragon wings behind her.
Oh yeah, that's a gorgeous shot.
You know, you see her army, and her army is made up of the Dothraki, who are all Conan the Barbarians.
Yeah.
Who will murder and rape and pillage and do whatever, and then the Unsullied, who again are the most evil army in the world.
For all intents and purposes, mindless killing machines.
They're stormtroopers.
Yeah.
They're literally Nazi stormtroopers. You know, you can love Grey Worm all you want, but Grey Worm murdered a hell of a ton of people in that final episode, even when Jon told him to stop. Like Grey Worm went with it.
Boss.
You know, like Grey Worm went. Yeah. He was totally complicit. With that,
I'm
shocked
that Grey Worm didn't just kill Jon, honestly.
I actually am surprised that we actually didn't. I'm
surprised that Grey Worm is sophisticated enough, and I don't mean this as an insult. I like him as a character, but that he was sophisticated enough to understand the power of Jon as a political piece.
I'm actually surprised that we didn't get a Grey Worm Jon fight. I was kind of expecting it. And then Tyrion, gets the best arc in the show. So there you go.
And he grows a dope beard for those final scenes.
All right,
which was great.
So I think we've gamed Game of Thrones enough, right? I think so. Ashley, let's talk about this. Overall, 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, one of the most watched shows of all time, one of the most definitely debated shows, and
well, the finale was the highest watched
HBO thing ever, right?
Ever. So yeah. I mean, for everyone who purported to be so mad about it, it didn't work.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Game of Thrones overall as an entirety of the show. So, real quick, before we move on, we liked the finale. I liked
the finale a lot.
I liked the finale as well.
Was it rushed? Could some of the stuff have used more breathing room and more discussion? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the beats, when you take a breath and you think about it, they all make complete sense.
I would give it a B+. I think.
Sure.
I love the ending with Jon. I do think it wraps up every character's arc nicely. And again, I think everybody, the two things that I'm hearing online is everybody's like, Bran is the king. Why didn't Dany win? And I'm like, well, 1, because we didn't want Hitler to win.
Yeah.
And then 2, because Bran is a mindless computer who can make the most logical decisions, right? We should all be ran. I'm voting for Skynet right now, guys. That's what I'm saying. Skynet rules Westeros. Okay, overall series, Game of Thrones. Ashley,
yep.
I would love you to give Game of Thrones a letter grade. Or, let's do this. This is the first of the Summer Road series. Let's give Game of Thrones as an entirety a Brago rating.
Out of 5 Bragos?
Out of 5 Bragos, and you can use 0.5s. Overall, to give your thoughts about Game of Thrones, whether you think it's successful, not successful, would you recommend it to people, and then give it a Brago rating. I think this is how we're going to encapsulate this. Again, everybody out there, at GHL Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.com/GHL Podcast or
Geek History Lesson.
Facebook.com/Geek History Lesson. Give us suggestions for future TV shows that have ended.
Totally.
That you want us to do this on. Again, Arrow's right around the corner. We could totally do Arrow as well. Ashley, Game of Thrones, thoughts and Brago score.
I love fantasy. Game of Thrones was right up my alley. If the show hadn't come around, I probably would have read the books eventually. Fantasy is very difficult. And I applaud everyone who worked on Game of Thrones in any capacity for making an outstanding fantasy show. I applaud them for making a fantasy show that subverted genre expectations, and I applaud them for making a fantasy show that subverted my expectations. I said this on Twitter. I've fallen in and out of love with Game of Thrones over the last decade for many reasons at many different times. But I feel like because I experienced it live, my entertainment consumption has been richer for it. I've had many spirited discussions because of it. I now judge people based on who their favorite Game of Thrones character is.
Oh, okay, wait.
And which house they belong to.
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
Okay, so what's the house that gets the most shade? Like if somebody says, I'm house this, what?
Oh, if you tell me you're a Targaryen, I will not be your friend.
Okay, and then what's, well, you should be friends with everybody, because...
Well, I'll judge you extra harshly. That's really what I mean.
I'm
just being honest.
What's the...
It's like people who tell me, who are proud to be Slytherins. I'm like, absolutely not. Well, you were founded by, as we learned in our Hogwarts history lesson, Wizard Hitler.
He is Wizard Hitler. Okay, besides Dany, what other characters do you judge people if they're like, this is my favorite character?
I actually don't judge people who Dany's their favorite character, because Dany's the character that on a surface level you're supposed to think is your favorite character. So people who fall for that, that's fine. People who tell me Cersei is their favorite character,
that's a little weird, right?
Judge them by. People who tell me that Marjorie Tyrell is one that I judge people
Marjorie Tyrell.
A lot of ladies. And
what?
Look, I love Natalie Dormer, the actress who plays her. I loved her in The Tudors. I think she's very talented. I think she's really sexy. Like, she does exactly what she's supposed to do for that character. But like, if she's your she's not even the best Tyrell.
She's barely in the show.
And this one's going to go right out to my friend Patrick, who I know is listening. If you tell me Renly's your favorite character, I judge you. So there's like a.
What do you got against Renly?
I just think Renly's a doofus.
He dies from a smoke monster.
You know what he does? I actually think Renly. If Renly had been a little less, if Renly had Davos at his side, or if he'd actually allied with Robb Stark, I think Renly could have been unstoppable. Because Renly is a lot of Robert's best qualities, but he's so much ego wrapped up in that as well.
Yes.
And shame. And internalized homophobia. But that's another discussion to have about.
How many Bregos are you giving Game of Thrones? Oh, so overall as a series, what do you think Game of Thrones did successfully? And let's hear the breakdown.
Overall, I think it's successfully. I think it's deeply flawed. I think it will appear on top 100, top 50, top 25, top 10 best television series.
Ooh, I don't know about top 10.
I think it depends on who's writing it and what your criteria are. For a long time, and I think it deserves to be a part of our pop culture discussion about some of the most successful television shows, flaws and all, and it's not an unflawed show. So out of a possible 5 Bregos, I just think it gets real stinky in the middle.
Just like Brego.
I'm gonna give it. Brego gets real stinky at one particular end. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 Bregos.
Oh, okay. So on the positive end,
good half. Yeah, I'm definitely more positive on it than negative, and that is perhaps influenced by the fact that I'm a book reader, so I do come in with more knowledge than someone who is maybe just watching the show. How about you? Wrap it up for me.
Well, there definitely were some games. There were some thrones.
There was a throne.
And there was some ofs. So I think just on that, Game of Thrones is a successful TV show. I think it, at its lowest point, was still better than 90% of television out there. It was a television show that brought us together. I think Game of Thrones overall had better characters than storylines.
I would agree with that.
I think that our favorite moments in Game of Thrones are most of the time quiet scenes between two characters, more so than some of the battles. Like, some of the battles actually were letdowns.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, we talked about the scene with Cersei and Ned Stark from season 1 that or when Cersei and Robert, the king, that is still two of my favorite scenes of the entire series.
Some of my favorite stuff from season 8 was Tyrion and Jaime.
Yes. I mean, to be honest with you, they could have made that whole episode in season 8 just people in front of the fire coming in and out, because those moments were so great, and that's the strength of the show, is that these characters were so well realized that they got up to some stupid storylines, and they really did. There are some stupid storylines in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That most of them I gave a pass because I liked and enjoyed the characters so much. So I think if you're looking for a show that is strong on characters and a little weak on plot, I think Game of Thrones is definitely a show. Like, I would recommend that people watch it. Again, it's flawed. When you brought up the list of like top 10, I don't think I would put Game of Thrones in my top 10.
But people will.
Oh, sure. And it deserves to be. It is one of the biggest television shows of all time. It would not be in my top 10 list. I don't know if it would make my top 20. It'd probably make my top 25.
I think it would definitely make my top 25. If you would like to hear our top 10 television shows, you can request it.
Oh, man. That's going to be a hard list. So, Game of Thrones, if I'm going to give Game of Thrones a Brego rating, I think I have to give it 3.5 as well.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if it quite makes a 4, because a 4 is a high rating for me. Like, 4 is like almost perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't think Game of Thrones is almost perfect. I think Game of Thrones is quite enjoyable, but flawed.
Yeah.
Because if I recommend Game of Thrones to people in the future, this is how I'm going to recommend it. It's a really fun show full of lots of fantasy, but man, the middle seasons are kind of boring.
Or a slog.
But if you can get through them, the end's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to say. So there you go. The inaugural talking about
television retrospective.
Is that what we're going to call it? What are we going to call these? We need a name.
Series retrospective.
Series retrospective? Review? No, I don't know. Hey, my university students, we need a name.
Yeah.
We need a name. We need a name for these. Please let us know a name for these. Series retrospective is not a bad name. Rerun retrospective? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, great.
I mean, we watched them live. We didn't watch them in reruns, but
it's reruns now.
Yeah. Oh, well,
the series is over.
Man, I can't wait to do our Frasier episode.
You know, if you're watching, this is evergreen, so people in the future for now.
Oh, also,
it's a rerun
if you're
retrospective.
Still mad about our April Fool's episode from 2 years ago about MASH, now's your time to request more MASH content.
Oh, good lord!
Because about once a month, someone emails me and asks me when we're doing more MASH episodes.
I will say this: I'm surprised at how many people we actually fooled with that. People thought it was a real podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, are you out of your mind?
I mean, really, kudos to us.
Cool. Well done, us. Okay.
Oh, Jason, I want to ask real quick.
Oh.
Who's your favorite Game of Thrones character?
Oh, interesting. Do you have a choice? You kind of sprung this on me, and I haven't thought about it.
I have, I guess, two choices.
Then you have to go first.
Again, I think Arya just stands head and shoulders above the rest. And Arya, like I said, represents an archetype that I really love. I love Theon Greyjoy, and I feel so bad for Theon. And I thought he was so wonderful toward the end, and I think that he is one of the characters who was elevated by his appearance on the show. I think Alfie Allen really brings a really wonderful complexity to that character that it's easy to gloss over in the books. So he always stands out to me. I love Theon. Was that enough time for you?
Yeah, sure. I think if I'm going off the TV show, it's a tie between Davos and Tyrion. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard not to automatically give it to Tyrion just because Peter Dinklage is...
he was born to play that part. We are so lucky
to have
Peter Dinklage in that role.
There's so many scenes in that show that would not work without Tyrion. And Tyrion, as played by Peter Dinklage, is given such depth and heart that you love him on the show, even though he's a villain.
He's a scoundrel.
He's a villain until season 5. He is a pure villain. And, I mean, he murders his girlfriend and bloody. He
does slap Joffrey, though.
But that doesn't give him a pass. Like he is a
right.
He is a villain.
He also kills his father.
He has a great arc. He's a villain, but the dad is kind of justified. But he redeems himself and becomes a hero in the end, and that's a great arc. And I like Davos just simply because he is a man who is a common man who in almost every scene remarks about how he really shouldn't be there, and at the end he's given this position of power, this really big position. He sort of works his way into becoming like Jon Snow's hand, and he really shouldn't be there, but he is, because he just says things as they should be.
I think the single funniest moment of the finale is when the small council is meeting and Bronn is talking and Davos corrects his grammar the way Stannis corrected Davos's grammar.
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that because I thought it was going to be the idea where he's like, I'm not certain if I get a vote.
I truly laughed out loud. I thought it was so... Well, at least he can read now. So
I do like Bronn arguing that we need brothels before we need a navy. That's pretty funny, though.
I know there was kind of no reason for Bronn to be in the finale, but I love that he was there, and I love that he was the Lord of Highgarden.
I actually, to be honest with you, I kind of predicted that too. I was like, Bronn's going to be right next to Tyrion in the finale.
I loved it so much.
So, yeah. All right, cool. So I think that is it for the episode. If you want to suggest a future TV show that we should do a rerun retrospective, a series retrospective, whatever the hell, please name it. Let us know. Where can they do that, Ashley?
You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast.
Yeah, and we're going to have a Geek History Lesson extra podcast over at the Patreon, patreon.com/Jawiin. That's where we have an extra podcast every single week that you can only hear if you're on the Patreons. What's it about? We don't know because we haven't recorded it yet. But if you go over there and give us just a single dollar, it makes a big difference. It helps support all the content over there, and you become a member of the Hall of Justice over there at patreon.com/Jawiin. Jawiin. Also, guys, don't forget my book, Super Soldiers, is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, Apple Books. You can buy it right now. It's about the secret connection between superheroes and the military. And I think it's pretty sweet and keen and pretty cool. And so does Mitch Garris, Dan Jurgens, Benjamin Percy, and Dan Aykroyd. They also liked it too because they gave me reviews. Go find it on Amazon. Give it a buy. And if you've already read it, then give it a review.
I think readers will learn as much about you as they will about the characters you're writing, actually.
That's right. It's pretty personal, so I'm pretty proud of that book. So Super Soldiers is on Amazon right now. Go give it a buy. You can follow Ashley on Twitter, Ashley V. Robinson. You can follow me on Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at GHL Podcast. I think that's been it. How's your road trip going, Todd? It's going good. Todd says it's going good.
If your name is Todd, please tweet us.
I hope somebody out there is listening and they're named Todd and they're
That's the name of the fox and Fox and the Hound.
I was on a road trip. My name is Todd. And I was listening to you guys doing this. So there you go. Yeah, first summer road trip retrospective. I think we'll have more. We'll drop them little nuggets, little discussions, little fun. Did you have fun with this, Ashley? I had fun with this.
I had fun.
Yeah, did you have fun with this?
Yeah.
All right, cool. How's the road trip going for you so far?
I'm kind of tired.
Oh, man.
I had an improv class earlier.
Oh, man. She's tired of the Game of the Thrones.
I'm tired of talking about game, that's for sure.
Tired of talking about
That's a deep cut for all you UCB.
My least favorite part is the of.
Impros.
My least favorite part is the of. I'm going to tell you that. All right.
You don't care for articles?
No, I don't. I think only if they're magazines.
Okay.
I have been Jason Braun is the man Inman.
I have been Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And Professor Ashley, will you please close out this podcast?
Class is now dismissed.